The strike happened at night. A convoy moving through a city in northwest Syria. One vehicle, no warning. The Reaper drone overhead had been tracking it for hours. The missile launched. Seconds later, impact. But there was no explosion. No fireball lighting up the street. No shockwave shattering windows in the surrounding buildings. Just a puncture in the roof of the vehicle, clean and surgical, and everyone inside dead. The car rolled to a stop. The buildings around it were untouched. The people sleeping in apartments 30 feet away never woke up. This wasn't a malfunction. This wasn't a dud. This was exactly what the missile was designed to do. The weapon was an AGM-114R9X, a variant of the Hellfire missile that carries no explosive warhead. Instead, it deploys 6 blades just before impact, extending outward like the petals of a deadly flower, and kills through sheer kinetic energy and precision-severing force. The target dies. Almost nothing else does. It's been used against high-value individuals in vehicles, in rooms, even standing in open courtyards. And every time, the result is the same. A single person eliminated. The surrounding area virtually unaffected. Why would the United States build a missile that doesn't explode? Because in modern warfare, sometimes the hardest problem isn't hitting the target. It's making sure you only hit the target. To understand why the R9X exists, you have to understand what the Hellfire was originally built for and how it evolved into something completely different. The AGM-114 Hellfire was developed in the 1980s as an anti-armor weapon, designed to be fired from helicopters at Soviet tanks. It was laser-guided, precise for its time, and carried a shaped-charge warhead optimized to penetrate heavy armor. It worked. It became the primary air-to-ground weapon for the Apache helicopter, and later adapted for use on drones. When the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq began, the Hellfire transitioned from anti-tank missions to a broader role. It started being used against buildings, vehicles, and individuals. The US military was fighting an enemy that didn't operate tanks or armored columns. They operated in trucks, safe houses, and crowded urban environments. The Hellfire adapted. Variants were developed with blast fragmentation warheads for soft targets. The weapon became the backbone of US drone strike capability, fired from Predators and Reapers conducting counterterrorism operations across the Middle East, North Africa, and South Africa. Precision became the defining feature. Laser or radar guidance allowed operators to hit specific windows, specific vehicles, specific rooms. The weapon could strike with accuracy measured in feet. But precision in guidance is not the same as precision in effects. A Hellfire with a blast fragmentation warhead is accurate. It will hit exactly where you aim it. But when it detonates, the explosion doesn't stop at the target. The blast wave propagates outward. Fragmentation scatters. If the target is in a building, the walls channel the blast unpredictably. If the target is in a vehicle on a crowded street, the explosion affects everything nearby. Precision in delivery does not guarantee precision in outcome. And in counterterrorism operations, outcome is everything. The problem became acute in urban environments where high-value targets were embedded in civilian populations. A terrorist leader living in an apartment building in a dense city, a bomb maker traveling in a car through a marketplace, a facilitator meeting in a compound surrounded by families. The intelligence might be solid, the target might be confirmed, the legal authority might be in place. But the weapon available, a Hellfire with a standard warhead, carried an unacceptable risk of killing people who weren't the target. And in counterterrorism, collateral damage isn't just a tactical problem, it's a strategic failure. Every civilian killed in a strike is a propaganda victory for the adversary. Every video of a destroyed building, every photograph of unintended casualties becomes a recruiting tool. It undermines political support for the operation. It strains relationships with host nations, it complicates intelligence cooperation, and it forces the question, if the cost of killing one terrorist is killing 3 civilians, was the strike worth it? This wasn't an abstract debate. Commanders were turning down strikes because the weapon available couldn't guarantee the outcome required. High-value targets were being tracked, identified, and then left alone because the risk of collateral damage was too high. The intelligence was good, the opportunity was there, but the weapon was wrong. The traditional response would have been smaller warheads, more precise fusing, better targeting, and all of those things were explored. But there's a floor to how small you can make an explosive warhead and still achieve a reliable kill against a hardened target or a vehicle. Below a certain threshold, the weapon becomes ineffective. You can't solve the problem by just making the explosion smaller. You have to eliminate the explosion entirely. That's what led to the R9X. The AGM-114 R9X looks like a standard Hellfire from the outside. Same body, same guidance, same motor, same launch profile, but the warhead section is completely different. There is no explosive. The warhead is an inert mass, heavy and solid, designed to maximize kinetic energy on impact. Just before the missile strikes, a mechanism deploys 6 long, sharp blades that extend radially outward from the body. These blades don't explode, they slice. The missile hits the target at high speed, traveling hundreds of miles per hour. The kinetic energy of the impact, combined with the blades, is sufficient to kill the target through blunt force and cutting trauma. If the target is in a vehicle, the missile punches through the roof, the blades deploy, and the occupants are killed instantly. The vehicle is destroyed, but there's no secondary blast. The car next to it is fine. The building across the street is fine. The blast radius is effectively 0. This is a fundamentally different weapon philosophy. Traditional missiles are designed to maximize destructive effects over an area. The R9X is designed to minimize effects everywhere except the exact point of impact. It's not about power, it's about control. The entire design is oriented around ensuring that only the intended target is affected, and that everything else, people 10 feet away, structures adjacent to the impact point, remains as undisturbed as possible. The precision required to make this work is extraordinary. You can't miss by even a few feet. If the missile hits the wrong car or the wrong room, there's no blast radius to compensate. The target has to be positively identified, tracked continuously, and the launch has to be timed so that no one else is in the immediate impact zone. This demands a level of intelligence confidence and surveillance persistence that exceeds what's required for a conventional strike. You can't use the R9X unless you're absolutely certain. And that's the point. The weapon forces restraint. It forces certainty. It forces the operator to be sure, because there's no margin for error and no room for ambiguity. The strategic implications of the R9X extend well beyond its technical characteristics. First, there's the psychological dimension. Adversaries know that the United States can kill a specific individual without harming anyone around them. That's a level of precision that's deeply unsettling from a counterintelligence and personal security perspective. You can't hide in a crowd, you can't use human shields. You can't rely on the assumption that the US won't strike because of collateral damage concerns. The R9X removes that calculation. If you're the target, the presence of civilians nearby is no longer protective. The weapon can reach you anyway. Second, there's the legal and ethical debate. Targeted killing is controversial. The R9X doesn't resolve that controversy, but it does change the proportionality calculus. International humanitarian law requires that military action be proportional, that the harm caused must not be excessive relative to the military advantage gained. A weapon that eliminates the target with near zero collateral damage arguably makes targeted strikes more legally defensible under that framework. Whether that's ethically justified is a separate question, but the weapon makes it harder to argue that the strike was disproportionate. Third, there's the intelligence threshold. The R9X requires a higher degree of confidence than a traditional strike. You need continuous surveillance. You need positive identification. You need certainty about who is in the target area. That means the weapon is only viable in environments where the US has persistent ISR, detailed intelligence networks, and the ability to track individuals over time. It's not a weapon for dynamic targeting or opportunity strikes. It's a weapon for deliberate, carefully planned operations. And that reflects a broader shift in US counterterrorism from large-scale operations to highly selective, intelligence-driven strikes. Fourth, there's the signal it sends about US priorities. The development of the R9X indicates that minimizing collateral damage is not just a preference, but a strategic imperative. The United States invested resources into building a weapon that is, by traditional military standards, less destructive. That investment reflects a judgment that the political and strategic costs of collateral damage outweigh the tactical benefits of a larger blast radius. It's a weapon designed for an era where public perception, legal scrutiny, and political sustainability matter as much as kinetic effects. The R9X has been used selectively and almost always in classified operations. Publicly confirmed uses include strikes against Al-Qaeda and Islamic State leaders in Syria, Yemen, and other locations. In each case, the pattern is consistent: a high-value individual eliminated, minimal or no collateral damage, the surrounding area intact. The weapon does what it was designed to do, and it does it quietly. But the R9X is not a universal solution. It works in specific conditions against specific targets. It requires intelligence that many adversaries are not vulnerable to. It requires an environment where the US has air superiority and persistent surveillance. It's not a weapon for large-scale conflict or conventional warfare. It's a tool of counterterrorism, built for an era where the enemy is individuals, not armies, and where the battlefield is often a city street or a residential neighborhood. The R9X also raises questions about the future of precision warfare. If you can build a missile that kills one person and leaves everyone else unharmed, what does that mean for how wars are fought? Does it make targeted killing more acceptable because the harm is so limited? Does it lower the threshold for lethal action because the consequences are reduced? These are questions without clear answers, but they're questions the R9X forces us to ask. The AGM-114 R9X is not the most powerful weapon the United States has ever built. It's not the fastest, not the longest range, not the most advanced in traditional terms, but it may be the most deliberate. It's a weapon designed not to maximize destruction, but to minimize it. A weapon that reflects a shift from overwhelming force to surgical precision. A weapon built for a world where the target is a person, not a grid square, and where the cost of getting it wrong is measured not just in lives, but in legitimacy. This isn't the most powerful missile the United States has built. It may be the most deliberate.